opinion editor at City and State Magazine. Joining me on today's edition of City and State TV is Clyde Williams. He is a candidate for the 13th Congressional District. It's a very crowded race to replace Congressman Charlie Rangel. Thank you for joining us today, Mr. Williams.
Well, thank you for having me here. I appreciate City and State giving me a platform in order to talk directly to the people of the 13th Congressional District. So thank you very much for having me.
Our pleasure. So, Mr. Williams, you ran against Congressman Rangel in 2012. You decided not to challenge him again in 2014. I'm curious, just from the outset, why did you decide to sit out that particular race after doing pretty well in the previous election, and what have you been up to in that time period since you decided not to run?
Well, first of all, I had no desire to run the same race against Charlie Rangel again. And what I've been up to is still have my consulting business with my wife and I, and we're still building our business and doing well with it. But what I've really been doing, and what I was really more concerned about doing than anything else, was making certain I continue to do work throughout the community. There's several things I've been focused on since the election of 2012. To give you an example of some of the things I've been doing within the community. Recently, not too long ago, we had DA for the Manhattan, Cy Vance, at my home, with more than 15 representatives from the New York City Police Department that are spread out throughout the entire congressional district. We had probably more than 50 some odd community people who were there. And we had a real robust conversation about what it is we should be doing as a community to make certain that young people don't get caught up in the criminal justice system, to make certain that we have a real communications between the police department and the community, and figure out how the community can do a better job of helping the police department to do its job. I've been working with an organization called City Health Work. It's a great organization. I sit on the board of advisors. One of the things that organization does better than I think most is it actually hires people for real jobs that exist today. They train people to be healthcare coaches. They've hired people throughout East Harlem and Central Harlem to actually deliver healthcare where it's necessary, like public housing, senior citizen buildings. And they train people for jobs that are important to our economy today. I've been involved on the issue of methadone clinics, particularly in East Harlem. You look throughout the community of East Harlem, El Barrio, and other communities such as in the Bronx and in Brooklyn, these neighborhoods have been inundated with all those things that aren't necessarily the best things to have in a community in reference to quality of life. No one is advocating that you shouldn't have drug treatment facilities for people in our communities, but no one community should have to bear the majority responsibility for that. More than 1/3 of all the methadone clinics on the island of Manhattan are located in Harlem. And so it's a burden that has really been tremendous on the community overall. And I made a commitment to a woman named Yolanda Sanchez, who actually ran Casabe House before she died, that no matter what, whether I won or lost, I would continue to work on issues that were important to her and other people within the community. I've also been working with Tiano Towers, people who own condos, people who own brownstones within the community on that very issue. We've actually had turned in more than 1,500 signatures asking the state and local government to do something about it. Because of my involvement on that initiative, I brought up the fact that for 10 years there's been a bill sitting in Albany that would have limited methadone clinics within 500 feet of a school or a church that has never been moved. And so I've been very involved and very engaged, and that was really the reason why I ran, because I wanted to see my community to be improved. And whether you win or lose, my objective was to stay involved, and that's what I've been doing.
That's interesting. So I'm curious, I wanted to just go back to, you said you didn't want to run the same campaign against Charlie Rangel. With Congressman Rangel retiring, do you see this election, this campaign as something of a referendum on his legacy, or a commentary on the legacy that he leaves behind? And what do you kind of see his legacy being after many years in Congress?
Well, I don't think it's up to me to make a decision about Charlie Rangel's legacy. I think it's up to the community, the people he's represented for 46 years. Charlie Rangel and Adam Clayton Powell before him made this congressional seat relevant. They made it a national congressional seat that people all across the country cared about, particularly African Americans. And what they both represented at the particular time when they were elected was the best and the brightest that our community had to offer. And I think that needs to be what we should continue to look at and strive for as we figure out who it is we want to represent us. I've had meetings with Charlie Rangel. Charlie Rangel's actually sat down and worked with me on particular issues. To give you one example, there was a school that closed in Washington Heights, Mother Cabrini, which had a large population of Latino young girls who went to school there. And I was approached by the alumni of the school and some parents of the school that asked me to help them to make certain these girls got placed. I called upon Congressman Rangel. I and myself and the people with this group, we went and met with him, and he actually called the Archdiocese for New York to make certain that all those girls were placed. And so there are ways to work together with people. And the thing for me is I want to make this very clear. I've never had any issues personally with Charlie Rangel or anyone else. I ran because I believe that I'm the best person to represent that community, and I continue to believe that.
It's fair. And so talking about the kind of the district itself and how that's changed over years, I mean, we've seen, you know, a heavy influx of kind of white gentrifiers, if you will, you know, kind of pushing the more low-income Black and Hispanic residents to the kind of margins of the community. Is that something that you've seen on the ground as you're campaigning, and how do you kind of bridge the various gaps in that district between Black and Hispanic and white, and kind of, you know, come together in one kind of concise vision for your campaign?
I think that anyone who lives in a congressional district, the most important thing to them is to elect someone who really serves their needs. I don't believe that people are caught up as much in the ethnic politics of the community as far as the voters. There's some of the electeds who are more caught up in that and really have done that throughout their political careers. That's not my objective. When I ran before in 2012, I had a multiracial group of people who supported me all across that congressional district. And I believe they supported me once again because I was the best candidate that was running, who had the best ideas and the best initiative to move our community in the right direction. And I believe that's what most people are looking for.
Now, the district is also now includes a large section of the South Bronx, and this has been kind of a contentious issue with some of the candidates that have run in the past, saying that, you know, or I guess even Charlie Rangel had said that this district shouldn't include the Bronx. It's a completely different demographic. How do you feel about, you know, the inclusion of this section of the Bronx that's you know, has probably many different issues than you see in you know, in East and West Harlem and Northern Manhattan? Is there have you talked to people on the ground there, and do you see that as being a kind of a stark divide between, you know, the Harlem River and kind of where that district divides?
For me, I don't see it as a huge divide. It's part of the district, end of story. And if you are serious about representing that district, you have to represent everyone who lives in that congressional district. I have talked to people continuously all across, including the Bronx. I'll be in the Bronx in a few days once again to be having additional conversations with people, as I've been doing for quite a while. And if you're serious about representation, it doesn't matter where people live in the district, you have to represent them. And one of the things I would definitely do if I were to win was make certain I had an office in the Bronx. I think that their concerns and their needs are just as important as anyone else who lives in any part of the congressional district.
And on the gentrification issue, because that's obviously when you talk about Harlem and East Harlem and how much that's changed, you can't talk about it without talking about, you know, housing and real estate prices and how that's, again, kind of pushing people to the margins. What do you see as the root cause of that? And is there anything that can be done on the federal level or from a policy standpoint that you'd want to work together with possibly the mayor or any of the other electeds to kind of get to the root of this issue?
Well, I think there's several issues that are important and are of major concern in the congressional district. First of all, almost 30% of the people live below the poverty line in the district. People talk about all the gentrification and all the things that have changed in Harlem, but certain things have remained the same. You look at the fact that a lot of the schools within the congressional district are failing schools. And the fact that 37% of African American and Latino boys do not graduate in 4 years in New York State. That's a problem. When you look at the fact that if you're in El Barrio on the east side of Harlem, if you go 5 to 10 blocks in one direction south, those people tend to live 5 to 15 years longer than if you go 5 to 10 blocks in the northern direction. Even though you have two of the best institutions in the country when it comes to being a medical institution, which is Mount Sinai and Columbia Hospital. So that means we have a problem with delivery of our healthcare system. And affordable housing is the one thing I hear everywhere I go within the congressional district. I don't care where I go. That's the biggest issue going. When you think about the fact that over the last decade, and this was according to Scott Stringer, a report he put out, rents have gone up 75% in New York City. Rents have gone up 90% in Harlem, 60% in the Bronx, and thousands of Dominicans have been pushed out of Washington Heights. It's a huge problem within our community. And one of the things that I find interesting is a lot of the electeds, particularly from Albany, they play political football with it. They introduce bills that they know are not going to go anywhere. They act as if they're champions for the people who live in apartments buildings. But yet, when rent regulations were expiring, at the very time when they should have been working on issues for people, they were out collecting money for the re-election campaign from real estate developers and from landlords. And developers and landlords are not the problem. They are in business to make money. I think that the elected officials have the responsibility to watch out for the interests of the people, not for the people who own properties. And I do believe there's a medium that can be had. I don't think that anybody should make anyone the enemy in this situation. I think we need to figure out how it is we come together and talk about it in a real way. And during my political campaign, I will lay out a plan that I think makes sense to have an impact on affordable housing.
Staying on that subject for a minute, the NYCHA chairman, Charlotte Olatoye, and the mayor have rolled out this kind of a revision of the Bloomberg proposal for the infill in NYCHA and leasing some of the public land for mixed-use housing and affordable housing. I'm just curious to get your take on that plan, and do you think that's part of the solution to kind of solving the housing crisis in your district?
Well, there's a huge component of our district where you have public housing. And with a $17 billion shortfall just in the capital budget, I think we have to be creative and look at several things. I applaud the mayor in trying to figure out how it is you solve a very complex problem. This is an ongoing problem. And the thing, again, where I find people are disingenuous and where they do things that I think are against the interests of the community, once again, people will come to Family Day at public housing. They'll buy hot dogs, they'll buy hamburgers, they'll come and speak to people. But yet, every single year, those people still have the same problems. You have mold, you have rodent infestation, you have all the things that make it almost unbearable for people to live in public housing. And so something needs to happen. What the mayor's trying to do, I think, is a credible solution. I don't think it's the end-all, be-all. And once again, I think there's several things we need to look at on a local level, state level, and federal level to figure out how we close that gap. And I think the federal government does have a responsibility to help New York City figure that out.
Now, you've so much of the conversation in the 2016 cycle has been kind of about big money in politics. This is something that both Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders, the Democratic nominees, are talking about a lot. During your 2012 campaign, you raised money in part using a super PAC. I'm curious if that is still active, and if it is, how do you reassure voters that you won't be beholden to the people and entities that support you through those means, as opposed to a normal election contributions?
Money is unnecessary evil in reference to politics. You cannot run a campaign if you don't have money. You can't get your message out. I think that what the Supreme Court did in reference to Citizens United was wrong. But the bottom line is that I think anyone will use whatever they have to their access in order to try to level the playing field. But for me, one, the PAC has nothing to do with me. It's totally independent, so I don't know if it still is in operation or not. There were a group of people who supported me who wanted to do it. That's their right to do it. And for me, money does not make a determination in reference to how I make a decision. I'm going to make the best decision based on what is in the best interest of the people I hope to represent, and what's in the best interest of my community, and what's in the best interest of my country, period.
Fair enough. And you also scored a pretty big endorsement recently. Tom Daschle, former Senate Majority Leader, excuse me. I'm curious, with political endorsements, there's been a lot of talk about how much they really connect with voters on the ground, and it being kind of more of an affirmation of status rather than kind of, this is somebody who's going to work with me to help our community or something like that. Right. So just, in the reference of the Daschle endorsement and just in general, how do you see how political endorsements help your campaign?
Well, let me first talk about Senator Daschle and his endorsement. I greatly appreciate it. I think that Tom Daschle was the kind of person on Capitol Hill who served in the House and served in the Senate and was Majority Leader in the Senate. His endorsement is like a seal of approval. It means, I think, to a large extent that you have a good understanding of what it takes in order to serve the constituency you want to serve. And he does not give out his endorsement lightly. To me, a lot of endorsements that you see on the ground here in New York City or New York State is like, you endorse me, I endorse you. It's like, let's pay to play kind of thing. Right. That's not what this endorsement is about. This endorsement is about looking at who you best believe is the right person, the best person to represent this district. And I applaud him for doing that for me. It's extremely important to me, and I appreciate it. And I don't take it lightly. And I don't take the responsibility of serving the public lightly. And as a person who's known Tom Daschle for more than 15 years, I think that's what his endorsement means, is that this is a person you can rely on, this is a person you can trust, and this is a person who can hit the ground day one in Washington, D.C., and do more for you than anybody else who's in this race to actually deliver for your community. It's not going to take me 2 or 3 years to try to figure out where the bathroom is. I will know where it is, and I'll know people on Capitol Hill, people in Washington, D.C., who will be willing to help me to deliver for my community that I want to represent.
All right. Clyde Williams, he's a candidate for the 13th District. Thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. And one thing I hope that comes about in this process is, for the first time in almost half a century, we will be electing someone new to Congress to represent the 13th Congressional District. And it is my hope that your organization, City and States, and others who truly care about making certain we have good representation will have a real debate about issues. One of the things that I think was not helpful in the 2012 race was this back and forth about whether or not people would run for seat after seat after seat if they lost their seat. We all know that if everyone who's in the Assembly or in the State Senate loses, they're going to run for their seat again. So let's not have that debate. Let's have a real debate about health care, Social Security, infrastructure, Medicaid, Medicare. Let's talk about the issues you brought up with me, about housing issues. This is a rare opportunity, as I said. We need to take advantage of it. And that's what I hope we will do in this election cycle, which did not happen in 2012.
Absolutely. Substance is the name of the game. Thanks again, Clyde.
Thank you. I appreciate it.